I stumbled upon my wife's diary purely by accident while searching for our insurance documents. One sentence shattered 28 years of marriage. I don't feel anything for him anymore. Instead of confronting her, I made a far darker choice. I vanished into the background, collected proof, and began crafting the perfect payback. My name is Clayton Hartwell, though everyone just calls me Clay. I'm 57 years old and have owned Hartwell's Auto Repair for 23 years. It's not glamorous work, but it's honest. I mend what's broken, people pay, and that's the end of it. No lies, no tricks, just old-fashioned problem-solving with my hands. I married Bridget 28 years ago, back when she was a secretary at the county clerk's office and I was a rookie mechanic. She was stunning then, still is, with those sharp green eyes and a smile that could make you forget who you were. Our son, Theodore, was born when she was 25, and for a long time, life was good. Truly good. Bridget's career advanced quicker than mine. While I was happy getting grease on my hands, she went back to school, earned a degree in accounting, and landed a job at Kessler Construction, great salary, benefits, and prestige. I was proud of her, honestly proud. It never crossed my mind that success might change her in ways I wouldn't recognize. The first real hint that something was wrong came about 6 months ago. I was searching for insurance paperwork after a customer claimed our shop damaged his car's paint. Bridget always kept our documents neatly filed in her desk drawer upstairs. That's when I found the credit card statement. Tiffany & Company, Nordstrom, some high-end spa I'd never even heard of. Nearly $8,000 spent in 3 months. When I asked her about it, Bridget didn't flinch. "I've been treating myself," she said. I still fixed on her laptop. "I work hard, Clay. I deserve nice things." The way she said my name, like it was sour on her tongue, should have been enough of a warning. But I'm a simple man. I fix engines, not relationships. So I nodded, went back to my garage, and convinced myself she was right. She did work hard. She did deserve nice things. What I didn't realize was that those luxuries weren't for our home or our life together. They were for someone else entirely. Someone who clearly appreciated expensive jewelry and French lingerie more than I ever could. The diary changed everything. I wasn't snooping, not really, just looking for the checkbook to pay property taxes. But there it was, sitting atop a pile of mail like it wanted to be discovered. A brown leather cover, edges worn smooth. I'd seen it countless times before, but never cared to open it. I wish I hadn't. The first entry wasn't even about me. Just a note about work, complaining that Raymond Kessler made everyone stay late for a budget meeting. Harmless. The kind of thing she used to tell me over dinner, not right in secret. I almost closed it, almost walked away. But something made me flip a few pages back, and that's when I saw my name. "Clay came home early today," she'd written neatly. "Found me on the phone with D. Had to make up a story about talking to Mom. Getting tired of all the lying. But what choice do I have? Clay wouldn't understand. He's too simple for complicated feelings. Too simple." Those words hit harder than any punch I'd ever taken. 28 years of marriage, and my wife saw me as too simple to grasp her emotions. I kept reading even though every word felt like swallowing glass. Page after page about someone named D. How he made her laugh, how he understood her ambitions, how being with him made her feel alive again after years of numbness. Then came the entry that froze my world. "I don't feel anything for Clay anymore." Written just 3 weeks earlier. No anger, no affection, nothing. He's like furniture I've grown used to. When I picture growing old with him, I feel hollow, like I'm already buried. I sat there for nearly an hour, staring at those words. The woman I'd built my life around saw me as a piece of furniture, useful until replaced. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was realizing she was right about one thing. I had been simple enough to trust her. Simple enough to work 70-hour weeks so she could have everything she wanted. Simple enough not to notice the makeup for errands and the new clothes. But simple doesn't mean stupid, and it sure doesn't mean weak. I closed the diary and put it back exactly where I'd found it. Then I went down to the basement workshop and started planning. Not revenge, that's for men who act on anger. I was going to do something smarter. I was going to vanish from her world, the way she'd already vanished from mine. And she was going to learn exactly what it feels like to lose something you thought would always be there. The next morning, Bridget came downstairs in a new outfit I didn't recognize. Black skirt, silk blouse, heels that probably cost more than a car payment. She kissed my cheek, just like always, but now I knew it was an act. Working late again tonight, she said, pouring coffee into her travel mug. Big presentation tomorrow. Sure thing. I replied without looking up from my newspaper. I'll grab dinner at Murphy's Diner. She hesitated for a second, maybe about to say something real, but then just smiled, that rehearsed, empty smile, and walked out to her BMW. Once she was gone, I called Pete Sullivan, an old Army buddy who'd become a private investigator after his divorce. Time to start gathering some facts, I told him. Pete Sullivan looked every bit his 62 years when he stepped into my shop that Tuesday morning. 2 decades as a cop and another 15 as a private investigator will do that to a man. But his eyes were still sharp as ever. When I handed him the printed photos of Bridget I'd pulled from Facebook, he studied them carefully, as if memorizing every feature. How long you been married to her? Pete asked, setting the pictures down beside the carburetor I was working on. 28 years this October, I said. We were planning to renew our vows for our 30th. She's already been organizing the party. Pete let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a groan. Yeah, maybe hold off on ordering that cake. What exactly do you want me to find out? I told him everything, about the diary, the strange credit card charges, the late nights at work. Pete listened silently, nodding here and there like a man who'd heard the story 100 times before. When I was done, he opened his small notebook and began to write. Standard surveillance package runs $1,500 for the week, he said. That'll get you photos, times, dates, and locations. If she's seeing someone, I'll find out who. Money's not the issue, I said. I just need to know how deep this goes before I make my move. Pete looked me over for a long moment. Clay, I've been in this line of work a long time. I've seen men in your shoes do all kinds of things. Some make choices they regret for the rest of their lives. You planning on doing anything stupid? I thought about that while I wiped grease off my hands with an old rag. Was methodically taking apart my wife's life stupid? Maybe, but it sure felt smarter than begging her to love me again or pretending I hadn't read what she really thought of me. I'm planning to protect myself, I finally said, to make sure that when this is over, I'm not the one left with nothing. Good answer, Pete said, snapping his notebook shut. I'll start tomorrow. Give me a week. You'll know everything worth knowing about your wife's extracurriculars. That night, Bridget came home around 9:30, claiming she'd had dinner with her girlfriends after work. She was wearing a new necklace, thin silver chain, tiny diamond pendant. When I told her it looked nice, she smiled and said she'd bought it for herself to celebrate signing a big client. You deserve nice things, I told her, meaning it in a way she couldn't possibly grasp. Later, while she slept beside me, I stared up at the ceiling, mapping out everything that needed to be done. The divorce, the house, the shop, the retirement fund we'd built over 3 decades. She thought I was too simple to understand complicated emotions. She was about to learn that simple doesn't mean defenseless. Theodore called that Thursday morning while I was replacing a transmission in Mrs. Patterson's Honda. My son's voice sounded older, steadier, more confident than the last time we spoke. Success has a way of doing that to a man. Dad, I've got some news, Theodore said, excitement bubbling beneath his calm tone. Sarah and I are engaged. We're thinking next spring for the wedding, maybe. I should have been thrilled. He'd been with Sarah Mitchell for 3 years, smart, kind, good family. But all I could think about was how this was going to complicate everything with Bridget. That's wonderful, son, I said, forcing cheer into my voice. Your mother's going to be over the moon. Actually, that's why I'm calling. We want to come up this weekend and tell you both in person. Maybe have a family dinner, start talking about wedding plans. Family dinner. The irony stung. In a few weeks, there might not be a family left to have dinner with. Of course, I said. Your mother loves planning parties. This will give her something exciting to focus on. That was the understatement of the year. Bridget had been dreaming about Theodore's future wedding since his college graduation, had opinions about everything from venues to flower colors, all tucked neatly into a notebook she guarded like classified intel. When I told her about the engagement that night, her reaction was exactly what I expected. She screamed with joy, started scribbling notes, dialing numbers, already calling venues even though it was past 9. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely happy. This is going to be the wedding of the century, she said, pacing the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. Sarah's father owns those car dealerships, so money won't be an issue. We could create something truly memorable. I watched her sketch out our son's future while dismantling our past, and an icy stillness settled in my chest. She was already spending money we might not even have by the time all this ended, making promises she probably couldn't keep. I didn't stop her. Let her plan. Let her dream. Let her picture a future where she still belonged in our family. It would only make the truth cut deeper once it came out. Pete called the next morning with his first update. Bridget had indeed worked late the previous night, but not at Kessler Construction. She'd been at the downtown Marriott, room 847, with a man Pete described as tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit, and driving a black Mercedes. Got photos, Pete said. Want me to keep watching, or have you seen enough? Keep following, I told him. I need to know everything. Theodore and Sarah showed up Friday evening in his new Audi, nervous but beaming. Sarah looked even lovelier than her pictures, with blonde hair and that kind of natural warmth that instantly made you feel like family. Under different circumstances, I would have been proud to call her my daughter-in-law. Mr. Hartwell, she said, giving me a hug that felt genuine. Theodore talks about you all the time. He says you taught him everything about fixing things. Not everything, I replied, thinking of the one thing I couldn't fix, my marriage. But enough to keep him out of trouble. Bridget glowed through dinner. She'd spent the whole day making Theodore's favorite meal, pot roast with all the trimmings, and the house smelled like the old days when we were happy. She peppered Sarah with questions about the wedding, jotting notes in a small leather-bound book like she was organizing a military campaign. June weddings are beautiful, Bridget said, refilling Sarah's wine glass. The weather's perfect, and the flowers are in full bloom. Have you considered Venice? Sarah and Theodore exchanged a glance. Actually, we were hoping to keep it small, Theodore said carefully. Maybe the country club, just close family and friends. Small. Bridget's fork paused midair. Theodore, this is your wedding. It should be a celebration, not some courthouse formality. I watched my wife plan a wedding for a marriage that might outlast her own, and the irony burned like cheap whiskey in my throat. She was so invested in Sarah's happiness, so focused on crafting the perfect day for someone else, while quietly destroying the home their marriage was built on. Later that night, after Theodore and Sarah had gone to bed in the guest room, Bridget sat at the kitchen table surrounded by wedding magazines and venue printouts. She looked content in a way I hadn't seen for months. They're perfect together, she said, eyes still fixed on a photo of an elaborate floral arch. Theodore will make a great husband. He learned from watching us, I said, testing the words. Bridget finally looked up, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But then she smiled and went back to her planning. We did something right, she murmured. The next morning, Pete called while I was making coffee. Theodore and Sarah were out running, and Bridget was still asleep, sleeping off the wine. Got more pictures, Pete said quietly. Your wife's boyfriend left his hotel room at the Hampton Inn yesterday morning. Kissed her goodbye in the parking lot like newlyweds. Send them to my secure email, I told him, stepping out to the porch where no one could overhear. Keep following him, too. I want to know everything about Dexter Rhodes. Already on it, Pete said. Guy's got expensive taste for a so-called mid-level manager. That Mercedes is new, and his downtown apartment's not cheap. After I hung up, I stood on the porch watching the sunrise, thinking about timing. Theodore's engagement should have been the happiest news of the year. Instead, it was just another complication in a growing web of problems. When Bridget finally came downstairs, she was already dressed and ready for another round of wedding planning. She kissed my cheek like we were still the happy couple Theodore and Sarah believed us to be. I thought we'd take them to see venues today, she said. The Riverside Country Club has a June opening. Sounds perfect, I said, meaning it in ways she couldn't understand. Monday morning brought more revelations than I was ready for. Pete's full report arrived with photographs that made my stomach twist. Bridget and Dexter Rhodes weren't just having an affair, they were living like a married couple during their hotel stays. Room service dinners, shared showers, morning coffee on the balcony, as if they owned the world. But what really caught my attention was the financial data Pete uncovered. Dexter Rhodes was earning six figures as a regional manager, yet his spending patterns suggested he had access to far more money than his paycheck could justify. The kind of money that comes from skimming construction contracts or padding invoices. Your wife's been signing payments to shell companies, Pete told me over the phone. Kessler Construction's been bleeding cash for months. It all traces back to invoices she approved. The pieces snapped into place like tumblers in a lock. Bridget wasn't only having an affair. She was stealing from her employer to bankroll this new life. The designer clothes, the jewelry, the hotel rooms, even Dexter's Mercedes. All paid for with embezzled funds. How much are we talking? I asked. Conservative estimate, Pete said. Around 200,000 over the past year. Could be more if this has been going on longer. 200 grand. Enough to ruin Raymond Kessler's company and put Bridget in federal cuffs. What had started as a simple plan for divorce suddenly turned into something far more dangerous. I spent the afternoon turning the information over in my head. The smart move was obvious. Document everything and use it as leverage in court. But another part of me, the part that remembered the woman I'd married 28 years ago, wanted to give her one last chance to come clean. That evening, Bridget came home late again, claiming she'd been working on a major bid. She was wearing another new outfit, a designer dress that probably cost more than many people's monthly pay. When I complimented her, she gave me the usual line about treating herself for working so hard. Bridget, I said, following her upstairs, is everything okay at work? You've been putting in a lot of hours. She paused, taking off earrings I'd never seen before, expensive ones. For a second, something flashed across her face, fear or calculation. Then she smiled and continued undressing. Raymond knows I'm dedicated, she said. Good employees are hard to find in this line of work. I nodded and went to take a shower while my mind raced. She was deeper in than I'd imagined. When it all broke, the fallout would be catastrophic, not only for our marriage, but for her freedom. A few days later, Dolores Whitman called the shop. Her voice was trembling in a way that didn't suit her. She was 76 and built like she'd weathered storms. When she asked if she could come by to talk, I knew it wasn't social. She arrived clutching a manila envelope like it was a life raft. I poured her coffee in my office above the garage, the same room where I'd been sketching plans for weeks. Clayton, Dolores said, settling into the worn chair across from me. I need to tell you something about Bridget I should have told you years ago. My stomach dropped. Whatever was in that envelope wasn't going to make things easier. Dolores told me Bridget hadn't been faithful to her first husband either. Irving caught her with his business partner, she whispered. That, she said, was the real reason their marriage ended, not the stories Bridget told everyone about growing apart. Irving Polk, I remembered the name faintly from Theodore's childhood, had moved to Florida after the divorce and kept to himself. Bridget had always painted him as immature, unable to shoulder responsibility. Dolores opened the envelope with shaking hands and slid me a letter. Irving's account of their marriage read like my own story with different dates and names. Late nights, mysterious charges, and emotional distance that widened over time. She destroyed that poor man, Dolores said, dabbing her eyes. Took half of everything he worked for and left him broken. I swore I'd never let her do it to another good man, but I was too cowardly to speak up when you married her. I read Irving's letter twice, letting each detail sink in. He wrote about finding Bridget with her lover in their bed, the same bed where our son was conceived, and about how she'd leveraged accusations of abandonment and emotional abuse to secure a larger settlement. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Dolores looked at me with tired eyes. Because history is repeating itself, and you deserve better than what she did to Irving. You've been a good husband and father, Clayton. Don't let her ruin you like she ruined him. After she left, I sat in my office clutching the letter and thinking about patterns. Bridget hadn't changed. She'd merely become more skilled at hiding who she was. The woman I married was the same woman who'd betrayed Irving Polk, only older and craftier. That evening, I called Irving in Florida. His voice was stronger than I expected, the voice of a man who had survived betrayal and come out intact. I wondered when this day would come, Irving said after I introduced myself. How long have you known? A few weeks, I replied. Found her diary by accident. Diary? Irving laughed, but there was no humor in it. She kept one during our marriage, too. Wrote terrible things about me and left it where I could find it. I think she wanted me to read it. We spent over an hour comparing notes about the woman we had both married. Irving had rebuilt his life in Florida, started a successful landscaping business, and even remarried. But the scars from Bridget's betrayal were still there, barely healed wounds that would probably never stop hurting. Don't make the same mistakes I did, he warned before hanging up. Document everything. Protect your assets. And don't believe a word she says during the divorce. She'll try to make you the villain, just like she did to me. The text message came at 3 a.m., jerking me from restless sleep. Bridget's phone buzzed on the nightstand, lighting up the dark room. She was dead asleep beside me, likely exhausted from another evening of her double life. The message read, "Car trouble on Highway 23. Can you come get me, D?" I stared at it for a long moment, then quietly got out of bed and went to the workshop. Dexter Rodas needed help, and my wife was too tired from their affair to answer. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. But this gave me an opportunity one hadn't expected. I dressed, grabbed my keys, and drove toward Highway 23, not to rescue Dexter, but to see what trouble he had gotten into. About 10 miles outside town, I found a black Mercedes on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking in the pre-dawn darkness. Dexter stood next to it, phone in hand, gesturing angrily. I parked 100 yards away and watched through binoculars I kept in my truck. The Mercedes had front-end damage, probably from hitting a deer, but Dexter kept glancing around nervously, expecting someone. This wasn't just a car accident. It was something else. 20 minutes later, a tow truck arrived, not from any local company, but from Columbus. The driver and Dexter talked briefly, then loaded the car onto the flatbed. I followed at a safe distance. The truck didn't go to a repair shop, but to an industrial area, into a supposedly empty warehouse. I parked across the street and watched several men inspect the car. This was no accident repair. It looked like a cleanup operation. I took photos of license plates and faces, then called Pete. "You need to see this," I said. "Bring your camera and meet me at the old Miller warehouse on Industrial Drive." Pete arrived 30 minutes later as the Mercedes was being pushed inside. From his car, we watched men in coveralls working methodically on the vehicle, not fixing it, but dismantling it. "What do you think they're doing?" I whispered. "Hard to say," Pete replied, adjusting his telephoto lens. "But whatever it is, they don't want anyone to see. That's not repair. That's evidence disposal." We stayed until sunrise documenting everything: the warehouse, plates, and the men. Pete even captured shots through open bay doors showing them removing parts of the front end. "Your wife's boyfriend is in serious trouble," Pete said as we drove away. "This isn't just an affair anymore. This is criminal activity." When I returned home, Bridget was in the kitchen making coffee, still in her robe. She looked tired but not worried about her missing lover. "You're up early," she said without looking at me. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "Everything okay? You seemed restless last night." She glanced at her phone, found no messages, shrugged, and returned to her coffee. "Just work stress," she said. "Nothing I can't handle." I nodded and went upstairs to shower, mind racing. Whatever Dexter Rodas was involved in, it was bigger than embezzlement and adultery, and my wife was at the center, knowingly or not. I left her diary open on her pillow, just as I planned, displaying those damning words. "I don't feel anything for him anymore. Not hate, not love, nothing at all." On top, I placed my wedding ring and the divorce papers I had spent weeks perfecting. The house was quiet when she returned from another late meeting. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then silence, and then a scream that probably woke half the neighborhood. I was in my workshop when she rushed down, still in her business clothes, disheveled, tears streaming. "Clay, please, we need to talk," she said, clutching the diary like it was evidence at a crime scene. "This isn't what you think." "It's exactly what I think," I replied, not looking up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. 28 years, Bridget. 28 years I gave you everything, and you threw it all away for some construction company embezzler who's probably going to prison. Her face went pale. "How do you know about?" "I know everything," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "The money you stole with Dexter Rodas, the warehouse where he disposes of evidence, your pattern of destroying good men who loved you. Irving Polk sends his regards, by the way." She sank into the chair across from my workbench, the fight gone like air from a punctured tire. "Clay, I never meant for it to go this far. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Bridget. You made choices. Every hotel room, every lie, every dollar stolen from Raymond Kessler's company. You chose them all." Pete Sullivan's evidence was already in the hands of the FBI and Bridget's employer. Dexter faced federal charges for fraud and racketeering. The warehouse operation we uncovered was part of a larger scheme involving stolen construction materials and insurance fraud. What about Theodore's wedding? She asked, for a moment sounding like the woman I had married decades ago. Theodore's wedding will be beautiful, I said. Felicia and I have already made arrangements to help with the planning. Felicia, she whispered. My attorney also happens to know me from before I became too simple for complicated feelings, I added. The next morning, Bridget was gone, packed what she could carry, and left before dawn, likely trying to beat the federal investigators closing in. She left a note claiming she would stay with her sister until things settled. But things were never going to settle. Raymond Kessler's construction company was bankrupt from her embezzlement. Dexter Rodas was in federal custody awaiting trial. And Bridget had become a fugitive who destroyed anyone who tried to love her. That afternoon, Theodore called, having heard from his grandmother about the divorce. His voice trembled, but he tried to be strong. Dad, I'm sorry. I had no idea Mom was capable of this. Neither did I, son, but we'll get through it. Your wedding will happen as planned, and your old man will be there smiling like the proud father I am. 6 months later, I walked Theodore down the aisle at the country club wedding Bridget had planned but would never attend. Felicia sat in the front row, her blue dress highlighting her eyes. When she smiled at me, I remembered what it felt like to be appreciated by someone who understood that simple didn't mean worthless. 18 months later, the courtroom was packed when Bridget finally faced justice. They found her in Miami, living under a false identity, working under the table at a hotel. Dexter had been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Raymond Kessler's company had collapsed, costing 47 people their jobs. I sat in the back row, not out of spite, but to witness the end of the story I had helped write. When the judge sentenced her to 6 years for fraud and embezzlement, she finally looked at me. I nodded once, not cruelly, but with the satisfaction of a man who protected himself and others from a predator. Theodore and Sarah's first anniversary was approaching, and they were expecting their first child. Sarah asked me to walk her down the aisle when her father couldn't attend due to surgery, an honor I cherished. Felicia and I had been dating for 8 months, slowly building something real. She understood that trust had to be earned again, and she was patient with my cautious heart. The auto shop thrived. Word had spread about how I helped bring down a criminal enterprise, and it translated into more customers who respected a man who stood for what was right. I hired 2 new mechanics and considered expanding into the building next door. On quiet evenings, I sometimes thought of the diary entry that changed my life. I don't feel anything for him. Those words had hurt initially, but now I understood they were a gift. They freed me from a marriage that was slowly killing my soul. Bridget had been right about one thing. We had grown into different people. The difference wasn't that I had become simple or boring. The difference was that she had become someone who only found happiness by destroying others. I had learned to feel again, trust again, and build something real with someone who appreciated the man I had always been. That was worth more than all the pain it had taken to get there. The last I heard, Irving Polk had remarried a widow who ran a flower shop in Clearwater. We exchanged Christmas cards, 2 survivors who had found peace after the storm. Sometimes, the best thing that can happen to a good man is discovering he married the wrong woman. It hurts like hell, but it opens possibilities you never knew existed.